Welcome everybody. We've just got people entering from the waiting room. So we'll just make that happen for another minute or so. But we're really happy to see everybody who's here today for our UNE event. And we will start the conversation in a moment. For those that are joining, we're recording today's session. It will be available offline for those people that were unable to attend. So please let me know in the chat if you have any issues with Zoom being recorded. But what we will do is when we get to the question and answer section, we'll stop the recording so that we have some privacy within the space. I am also going to turn on closed captions in case there is anyone with a hearing impairment so that you can use that and join along with us so that we have some freely accessible information for people to be able to engage with. Okay, so welcome everybody to a UNE event, which is actually hosted by Social Work within the School of Health at the University of New England. I wanted to start not just by welcoming you here, but acknowledging country and noting that UNE respectfully acknowledges the First Nations custodians of this continent and pays respects to elders past, present and emerging. We honour the rich cultural heritage, beliefs and enduring relationships to the lands and the communities in which we all live and learn and work. I'm coming to you from Darug and Guringai lands in the northwest of Sydney, when my home beautifully backs on to the songlines of the Great North Walk, which I understand from a cultural perspective is a safe haven for women and children for thousands of years moving across country. My name is Associate Professor Sarah Wayland. I am proudly the discipline lead of social work and so excited. It feels like it has very much been a long time in the making that we can welcome Nicole here today, who is our visiting academic from Germany. I'll give her an opportunity in a moment to explain who she is, her wonderful skills, and what she's going to be talking about today. But first, what I wanted to do was just situate the conversation. We've got about an hour and a bit to have a conversation today about some international reflections on social work in schools. I'm going to hand over to Carrie in a moment, and she's going to talk about the history of social work in schools from a UNE perspective. But we've been working really hard this year on our networks and our collaborations with others. I think in a post-pandemic world, we can very much understand that wellbeing is at the forefront of a lot of our focus in a social work perspective, but also in a school's perspective. I wanted to acknowledge that some of the conversations around wellbeing can be distressing for people. I think we've lived through a pandemic. We're also living in a cost of living crisis. And often the responsibilities come down to those frontline workers, the social workers and the teachers, that are really seeing the ways in which distress is embedded within our school communities. So just wanted to acknowledge that, recognise that sometimes innovative, creative conversations can force us to look at what the status quo is, and we'd really love some collaborative conversations today. As a housekeeping perspective, what would be great is if you could make sure that you're muted while Carrie and Nicole are speaking. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask through the conversations that we're having, you don't have to wait until the end. I know, like many people, I'm not very good at holding on to my thoughts. I'll have a thought and I have to quickly ask it or it'll be lost forever. Please pop it in the chat or put your hand up and unmute yourself and ask a question. We want this to be a space, imagining that we're all sitting around together having a cup of tea and sharing those learnings so that we can take them back to whatever areas that we work. So I'd love to hand over to Carrie, who's going to talk about almost like a bit of a PR spin for the amazing work that we do here at UNE in social work. And then Carrie will introduce Nicole. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's so lovely to be here today. I'm just going to bring up my slides now. I'm coming to you from beautiful Awabakal country. And I'm here today to talk about the Social Work in Schools program. So there you go. So I'm the Social Work in Schools program manager, and my name's Carrie McClure, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of this program. This is a collaboration between education at UNE and also social work at UNE, and Myth Maple developed this program, and the first placements were in 2015. So since then, from the start of one school, which really started as a pilot program, we've now got almost 50 schools on our Social Work in Schools program list, and we have over 130 Swiss students that have been placed in public schools across New South Wales. And I've put in a little map there. We've since gone further west, and we've since gone further south, and we've placed in Tasmania, and we're starting to talk to schools in Western Australia as well. So our program has certainly been distributed widely and has been very successful across a range of high schools, public primary schools, flexible learning centres. So we're getting really good responses. The overall focus of the program is to help strengthen wellbeing in a school setting. So that's working closely with children and young people in schools, with the teaching and wellbeing staff, and also with the wider school community, because we know that the community is unique, and that we need to consider that in terms of thinking about support services. Overall, the program's aim is to address the social determinants of health, and to also help children and young people feel safe in their school setting, feel that they can connect and engage, and to be able to really thrive. So we are wanting to help children overcome disadvantage. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the role of our student social workers in our Swiss program, so that you can understand the range of skills and the value that our student social workers bring into their school settings. So we have direct practice, providing one-to-one support to children and young people in schools who may be experiencing bullying, or they may have some social, some social skills issues that they need support with. Or perhaps one of those young people has just lost a parent and needs to return to school. Or it could be that the cost of living has hit really hard in their family and they're experiencing homelessness. So that's providing one-to-one support in collaboration with the wellbeing staff in the school setting. Our students also do wonderful group programs, designing and facilitating group programs, meeting the school needs. We've got a number of Swiss students at the moment that have been asked to come in and run social and emotional skills programs. Often schools will comment and say, we have desperately wanted to run this program. We know there's a need, but we just haven't had the resources. And that's where our Swiss students support. We also look at exploring service pathways. So that's building service capacity in the schools and wanting to make sure that we're working both at the micro and the macro level, looking at advocacy, research and policy review, and also professional development. So our Swiss students have come in and provided professional development sessions to wellbeing staff or teaching staff in the school. And what we're learning along the way is it's really important to respond to the whole school community. So that's providing support to teachers as well, who are also faced with the impacts of trauma and working with young people experiencing trauma in their schools. So as with social work practice, our Swiss students have a framework that they're working from that underpins interventions. And so our Swiss students are drawing on the Code of Ethics and Practice Standards. As part of the Swiss program, when they go into schools, we ask them to complete 5 mandatory training sessions from the Department of Education, as well as completing a Swiss workshop alongside their intensives before they start placement. So our Swiss students will be drawing on the Code of Ethics from the Australian Association of Social Work. They're drawing on the practice standards and also on the interpersonal skills and advocacy skills that they've developed as part of their study. And of course, we ask our students to situate themselves within that organisational context, thinking about legislation and policy frameworks. And again, students will be thinking critically about their knowledge base that they're bringing into their placement, their practical, theoretical and research base. So we encourage us with students to be working from an evidence base and to be able to take that into practice. And what's really exciting is we have a number of placements now where our ex-Swiss students are now supervising current students. So we're seeing a number of our students move into the school social work space as part of their career. I just wanted to include a quote from one of our Swiss students. And she says, she worked in a high school, her name was Natasha, and she says, I was able to co-facilitate lots of group work and activities aimed at building relationships and encouraging students to seek support regarding their wellbeing, relationships and safety in the playground. She said, I saw my role as being a voice for students and advocate for their needs, to keep them engaged with their learning, which is a potential game changer for the future. And I think her comment really struck a chord with me, because it's really about how do we support wellbeing so that young people can engage in their education, which can change their future pathway. So this year, as Sarah mentioned, we have been working collaboratively with a range of key stakeholders in the wellbeing space in schools, and again, a very exciting space to be in. We were able to hold the 2023 Swiss Forum, the Social Work in Schools Forum here in Newcastle, where we really looked at what is wellbeing in our schools, how do we define that, and how do we respond to that, and what does that look like? Because this is very much an emerging space in New South Wales. So we were fortunate to have members from the Department of Education and also members from Catholic schools, along with another range of key stakeholders. So we could have a look at what's the school support officer role in high schools look like, and how do we think about that role? How do we think about the social work role as school counsellors in the Catholic school system? And overall, what was exciting is that we're bringing such a range of different lenses into this space, but we're all focused on wellbeing. So part of our forum discussion really focused on, we've been through a pandemic, we're still in a pandemic, but we're now faced with the rising cost of living. Schools are reporting increasing levels of homelessness and poverty, and we're hearing about increasing child protection referrals as well. So this is an absolute space where wellbeing support is needed. It was also an opportunity to start thinking and talking about what's the wellbeing space look like in primary schools as well. Because what we're finding is, as we place with students, often schools will be asking me about the next stages for that student to be able to remain there, because they can see the value of social work support. So I've popped down my email at the bottom of this slide. If you're interested in connecting further in this collaborative space, please contact me and I'll link you in with the network that organised our collaborative space for social work in schools. This is a slide, and it's one of the last slides before I pass on to Nicole, Professor Tiggers. It's one of the slides that I show students before they go out into their placement, where we look at the core focus of wellbeing, that teachers and student social workers and school counsellors all hold this wellbeing focus for children, and that it's about working together and focusing on collaboration to be able to deliver really good outcomes for children and young people and provide that consistent support. Today, we've got Nicole Tiggers, Professor Tiggers, in the room with us, who'll be taking over shortly. In the spirit of collaboration, I just wanted to reflect on a few experiences that I've had with Nicole over the last few years. We've been really fortunate because Nicole works for the University of Applied Sciences and Arts in Dortmund and is a professor with extensive experience specialising in school social work. So over the last few years, we've been able to have collaborative workshops between German social work students and also our UNE Social Work students and education students from UNE, which means that we're able to come together and really think about our different professional lenses, the experience of social work in schools and the experience of teaching students on placement, and how we find ourselves in this wellbeing space and learn from each other. So I feel, Nicole, that I've learned a lot from you so far. I'm very excited because Nicole's over in Australia, and I think I'll be doing a lot more learning over the next year. So I'm going to pass across to you, Nicole. I'll stop sharing my screen now. I think I have. And I'll pass across to you for this next part of the seminar.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yes, Carrie, thanks for this introduction. It was, yeah, it pretty much leads to what I'm going to, what I've got to offer. As you said, we have met around 2 years ago and have held already a few workshops with German and Swiss social work students. And I would like to give some insights today into the challenges and benefits of school social work in Germany, because we go a long way back concerning school social work. We have had school social workers around 50 years ago in Germany. But before I can do that, I would like to introduce you a little bit to the German school system. Just about me, I'm a professor of educational science and social work in schools. I'm the first professor of social work in schools in Germany. That was pretty new, like around 16, 17 years ago. I used to work in Armidale already for 1 semester. I was over for 7 months and worked in the education department. And after that, I started in Dortmund at the university, and social work in schools was always of big interest for me, because I was always before I worked in teacher education, and I was always complaining about the teaching in Germany and the schools in Germany and how everything goes wrong, and that there's no one looking after the well-being of the children and so on. So I started to find an interest in this profession, and I did some research on it. So this is me. I'm also working as a counselor since 25 years or so for school staff. So I'm helping teachers to get a different perspective on their schools and on their work. And this is really interesting, and I can feedback this to my students when I work at the university. Because it's very hard to compare Australia to Germany. They're both federal states and with very diverse educational systems and approaches. I thought I'd choose New South Wales and North Rhine-Westphalia, where Dortmund lies and where we are. At the moment, I'm sorry, I forgot this. I'm at the Sunshine Coast on the land of the Kabi people. And I'm very grateful that I can spend a year here with my family and still work for the university in Armidale. So North Rhine-Westphalia is a little bit smaller than New South Wales, as you can see, with a lot more people. So maybe one reason, because Germans are, seem to be very stressed very often and exhausted, could have to do with very many people on not much space. We've got 4,500 public schools in North Rhine-Westphalia and 2.5 million pupils there, where we have a high number of children and young people with migration backgrounds, because we have a lot of foreigners and children and people with migration backgrounds, especially now with the war in the Ukraine. We have many people that we take in the schools as well who don't have German as their first language. Numbers of teachers, and I can give one number for North Rhine-Westphalia. For school social workers, we have around 3,000 school social workers in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is the biggest federal state in Germany, and this is a ratio of 1 to 830, 850 people, which is not much. It's still not a good ratio, but it used to be, when I started 17 years ago with school social work research, we had around 1,000. So there was a good development, and lots of things have happened since then.
I think, Nicole, just looking at that slide, I know that this was one of the discussions that we had at our recent collaboration around ratios and numbers. And I think for the audience, and Carrie, you also jump in here, is that part of that complexity of first talking about ratios and recognizing that a ratio is never really a reflection of what the need is, because you could have one child and have high needs, or you could have 10 children and limited needs from them. And so we know within New South Wales that some of the questioning is around a ratio of 1 to 500. But the added complexity is the definition of school social work and the role of school support officers, and then the role of private education system. So Carrie, that's a really difficult gap to actually conceptualise, isn't it?
Yes, it absolutely is. And Nicole and I had this conversation prior to today in terms of thinking about how many school social workers are in New South Wales at the moment. How many of those are called school social workers? Actually, many will be employed as school support officers, but that's not a strictly social work role. That's a school support officer role. We have school social workers employed in the Catholic system and also in the private schooling system. But it's trying to sort of understand and how you conceptualise what school social work is in New South Wales at the moment. And the ratio certainly is an ongoing discussion. I know that that's a discussion that's happening across networks at this time.
Yeah, and we have had and still have the same discussion in Germany, since I will show you a few milestones later, but since we have 16 states in Germany, federal states, we had 16 names for the profession, or for what social workers can do in schools. So we have the same issue that you are talking about: counseling, school counselors, officers, and so on. So a couple of years ago, I was asked by politicians, okay, then give us, if you want more social workers, then give us numbers and say how many are there in Germany and how much money would they cost and so forth. And so we started with a little group of researchers. We said, okay, we have to produce numbers, but without having a name for them, we cannot produce numbers. So what we did now was we have set up a questionnaire or a setting with which we could produce numbers, but we haven't done this yet because that was such a hard work to define what these people do in schools. But in North Rhine-Westphalia, it is pretty much sorted, and we have a legal background now, so that we can actually call them school social workers and we can count them. From these 3,000, there's about 1,600 who are paid by the state even. So they are sponsored or employed by the state. The others are from other sources, but I'll come to that. Then people are always interested in PISA, which school system is better, who's performing better, and I would say Australia and Germany are not so far away from each other. We are on place 20 and you on place 16. I just heard on the news yesterday that reading competencies or literacy competences have getting worse again in Australia, and we have the same issues in Germany. But with so many kids not speaking German, we of course have difficulties in performing in these PISA researches. So schools in Germany, I think one big difference is that Germany is has got a very long tradition, conservative tradition of separating kids at a very early age. This is very different to all other school systems that I know. So from year 1 to year 4, they go to a primary school. And then they leave this primary school and they go to completely different other schools. So primary schools and secondary schools are not on a campus or so, but they have to choose one of these possibilities that you can find here, from Gymnasium to Hauptschule. Whereas, and this sounds really rough, but the Hauptschule is the one where no one wants to send their kids. It's called the school for the rest. This is how it is put in Germany. We're trying to get rid of these Hauptschulen and go more into grammar schools or comprehensive schools that you would call them, I think. But basically, when you want to go to study at university, you should go to a gymnasium. And in a very early age, like in grade 3 already, when they are 9 years old, parents and teachers have to decide, is this child good enough to go on this path? So this is very stressful for children, very stressful for parents. And our school or the education performance relies very much on origin. So if you're from an academic background, you're more likely to go to a gymnasium than if you're not. So with the age of 10 years, the children go to one of these school types, and they can then finish after 13 years of schools altogether. We have changed this for 4 years, or 4 years ago, we have changed this into 12 years, but Germany realized that this was not good. So kids are still going 13 years to school when they want to start university. That's a long time. They are 18 or 19 years old when they start uni. Many of them do a gap year, so they start when they're 20. I think this is a big difference. The separation and the segregation is an issue in our country, and for social work, of course. Education, on the other hand, is a state matter and basically free of charge. I realized already, because my 3 kids, they go to school in Australia now, and I get a better insight into the system now, that schools here are very commercialized and very expensive, even if they are state schools. I've realized I've already paid a few $100 for school trips and stuff. And I'm very happy to do this because they do fantastic things. But this wouldn't happen in Germany, because all the outings and stuff is free, and you get support. And yeah, there are some questions in the chat, and I was wondering if I should look at them. Are you taking care of them?
Yes, Nicole. We've got some feedback from Kerry, who points out there's a process here about in year 5, students actually do an exam to go to opportunity classes, and then often that's a highly competitive stream that ends up in selective schools.
Yeah.
So there's that. She was pointing out that similarity, but she said that everyone can apply to get into university. Yeah. So yes, she was just sort of noting that. But I'll alert you. I'll keep an eye on the chat for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So predominantly all-day public schools. We're getting more and more all-day schools. This is quite new still in Germany as well, that kids go to school in the afternoon. This is becoming more and more of an issue. And it's characterized, as I said, by a structural subdivision of the secondary schools. We have a high number of special schools still. Since Germany has joined the UN Convention in 2008-2009, and the numbers of school children going to special schools have only decreased slightly. And this is something that frustrates me in my everyday work as a researcher, that inclusion is not practiced in German schools. We talk about it, but let's go to the next slide and I can explain it a bit more. It's the last bullet point here. As long as inclusive strategies have not been implemented well enough, parents tend to send their children to special education systems, because they say they are safer there, they have better equipments and frameworks there. So the structure of the German school system altogether is based on the assumption that homogeneity in groups is important for the achievement of all students, which I also find ridiculous, because diversity, research has shown that diversity in groups is very powerful and good for the for education and for competing and stuff. And year level repetitions, I don't know if this is happening in other countries as well, and school changes can lead to more homogeneity. So kids in Germany can actually repeat a year. So all their peers, they go to grade 6, and the ones who haven't performed well enough, they stay in grade 5, and then they see the others play with the former friends on the playground, and that's of course very frustrating, and it's not the way it should be. So a total of 2.4% of our pupils in mainstream have repeated a year. Out of the 15-year-olds, we have 18% who have repeated a year at least once in their school time. And when I show you this is all, well, these are all topics that school social workers, of course, encounter in a school atmosphere, that the fear of having to repeat a year is always there, and to segregate and be separated. And it leads to interrupted educational biographies, of course. As I said, educational success in Germany is very strongly dependent on origin. Every PISA study in every 4 years shows us this effect again, and we don't seem to have good measures to change this. So these are problems that we encounter. What the general structural reforms at the moment relate to is mainly the time management. As I just said, 9 years gymnasium or 8 years gymnasium. We want them to stay longer at school or put the same education into a shorter time, and the expansion of the all-day schools. And also, it is being discussed to reduce the extent of separation. Well, Germany is aware of this issue and this problem, but it's not easy. So the core aims for German schools, this is what teachers learn when they get their teacher education at the university, is the qualification, of course, to provide skills and knowledge for work and participation in social life. This is what a teacher has to do. And the selection to pass on dominant social positions from one generation to the next. When I tell this to my students, social work students, they sometimes they are irritated, or they say, well, is this true? Is this really what they learn to do? It is not put in these words. Carsten Speck, who wrote this in his introduction to school social work, he's a highly known and respected researcher in social work and school social work, and he just put it as it is. This is what they do. Of course, they're not being taught, well, your job is to select, but your job is to look at the deficits of children that they have in their learning, and if you cannot delete the deficits, then please recommend that they go to one of the other schools and not to the one that leads to the university. So it's not as if they are being taught to help children to get the best out of themselves they can. Accordingly, school in Germany is a highly formalized institution with clearly defined objectives and work processes with little room for maneuver. Very traditional, very conservative, and it's like a tanker that is being, that is not so easy to steer. I think I've said before in a different context that changing a school in Germany is also very hard because lots of teachers are civil servants. So schools, as I said, are not commercialized. They are not a business, really. So if I, as a teacher, stay at this school or not, if I don't, I don't know, hit a child or something, nothing really happens to me. So I can be a good teacher from my inner motivation, but I can also not. I can do my work as I on a basic level. what could be the benefits of a school social worker now in such a system? That of course, I have drawn this picture in very dark colors now, and I must admit, of course, we have schools in Germany that are performing really, really well. We have very nice inclusive schools, but they are still projects, and they are little lights at the end of the tunnel. I don't see this in the overall picture. So, as Carrie has mentioned before, they are functioning in an independent field of action at the interface of youth welfare and school. So, I find the role of a school social worker quite eloquent, or they've got a lot of freedom if their role is played well enough. Let's put it that way. Because they can act independently if they have a strong personality and if they know what they're doing. They support young people in their individual and social development. They try to reduce educational disadvantages, and I have already mentioned a few of these disadvantages. Why do I have a better chance of performing in school or doing well when I come from an academic family than if I come from a low economic family? Everyone should have the same chances and get the same support, and school social work can help to address this issue. And they ensure participation opportunities for all. They act in advocacy for children and young adults and not for teachers. This is sometimes misunderstood when also in papers that I read, that sometimes they are mistaken as assistants to teachers or assistants to the school or supporters, or I don't like these words, because I want to see them in an independent field of action with a strong own profession. They advise and support parents and other guardians in education, protect the children, of course, from their risks to their well-being, and this is maybe the most important thing I think they're doing in a school system, and they contribute to maintaining or creating positive living conditions for them and their families. And school is not always a child and family-friendly environment, I must say. Again, school in Germany, only, a little thing, but this is on a personal level. Since you have so much space, of course, schools in Australia, or the schools that I've seen here so far, they have more hectares and acres that they can put their schools on. And this is a basic thing. My middle child, Max, he has spent 4 years now in a school where he was basically fenced in, because they had a little tiny playground where they were not allowed to play, because the ball could hit the what's it called, the school managers. There was this housekeeper, so he parked his car on the playground, and this was allowed because he looked after the school, and so they couldn't play balls. And when we first went here to the new school, my children were overwhelmed by the 4 or 5 football fields that they had. So yeah, these are different things, and it's not very child friendly if you can't do anything in your playground or in the breaks. Breaks. There's the word. School social work breaks down barriers and actively ensures equal opportunities. They build trust on the basis of low threshold offers with mediating and coordinating skills, because they don't teach and they don't give grades and rate the students. They can maybe, or they have the chance to build trust and build a relationship. And of course, they do this whilst they place more emphasis on informal and non-formal education. In 2013, just 2 years after, I was asked by the leader of the coordination office of school social work in Dortmund. She came to the university and said, Nicole, I have a problem. The state has given millions of euros for a project to install social workers in schools, and I need 80 graduates now from you that I can put on these open places. And this has never happened before and not after, that someone was looking for 80 social workers to work in schools, because there was so much money there. And these social workers have started their work, and in 2013 we were asked to evaluate this. And this time I don't bring I bring two interview answers from the principals who haven't had social workers in their schools before, and they said this means that we have been able to set up a completely structured system of counseling now, because we have this contact person, the school social worker, because our 2 school social workers are involved in networks that we did not have at our disposal before, at least not to this depth, up to the youth welfare office, up to the sheltered housing even. They always seem to know immediately who to contact, don't they? And that means that the network structures that have been built could only have been built up because the 2 of them are here, because they are active precisely at this interface between the external counseling bodies and the internal counseling bodies. So finally, they had someone, well, they were overwhelmed by all the problems they had in their schools, and they didn't know who to turn to. And the school social worker had this network and could build on this network, and could react in certain situations. And this one again refers to the counseling structures. That is getting much more professional, or that it has become much more professional. Oops. Sorry. Okay, so what is so special about Dortmund and school social work in Dortmund? So Dortmund has been one of the first cities in Germany who has what I just called a coordination office for school social work. It's become a good practice example for the rest of Germany, and many cities and regions and towns and rural areas have copied the way Dortmund has done or set up their social work system. It's the 9th largest city in Germany. As you can see here, this orange bit, Dortmund is not far from Düsseldorf and Köln in Western Germany. There's Holland, the Netherlands, Belgium. So this is where Dortmund is. Used to be an important coal mining town, but coal is not mined anymore in Germany. So Dortmund has gone through a very, very big change in the last 20, 30 years. Over 600,000 population. Every 6th person in Dortmund receives benefits from the state. We have a high unemployment rate, about 11%. High numbers of refugees and people with a migrant background in that area, and high numbers of children with German as a second language. So teachers not only have to do with these segregation issues and separation stuff, they also have to deal with or work with children who don't speak the language. They were imagining that they can teach this language. I know many teacher students who are surprised when they first go to school and say, well, I've got from this 20 kids, 16 or 15 don't speak German. So what can I do? I wasn't prepared for this. And that's a big issue. Germany has around 150 public schools and 190 school social workers who work mostly in full-time positions. And we try to only put them in one school. We have areas in Germany where a school social worker works at 3 schools or 4 schools even. But Dortmund tries not to do this. And more than half of them work in teams. and predominantly in mixed gender teams. They are employed, as I said, either by the state or one of 14 non-statutory welfare organizations. Dortmund has a binding framework concept, school social work at schools, and it has, and each school is now, this is interesting, I think, the schools who have a school social worker, they have implemented individual school social work concepts. So the school social worker sits down with the principal and with the rest of the staff and sets up what this special school needs from social work. And then they begin to negotiate. And the school social worker says, okay, this is something I can offer, this is something I won't offer. Let's have a look at the framework, the Dortmund framework. Is this in the framework? Oh, no, it's not. So I can't do, I don't know, homework training. This is not what I am obliged to do. Look here, it's in the framework. And then this is the way how they negotiate their individual school concept, because we take into account that every school is different and that you can't say a school social worker has to do this at any school. So you have to look at the individuality of the certain school.
Nicole, can I just jump in
yes.
and just ask you, what do you mean by binding framework? That sounds really interesting to me. The binding framework concept, school social work at Dortmund schools.
Yes, we sat down with key stakeholders for a couple of workshops in Dortmund, like people from schools, for the principals, the school social workers, the people from kindergarten, and other key stakeholders, and we said, okay, what is needed in schools from school social work? What do we want to do and what can't we do? What is the profession able to offer? And then we had really hard discussions about topics like, when a teacher is ill, can I ask the school social worker to replace them for 2 or 3 lessons? And in these discussions, of course, the principal says yes, because we have this problem, we don't have enough teachers. And then the school social workers, but this is not our role. And in a very detailed and very long and hard discussion emerged. So what emerged at the end, this framework, it's like a 30-page booklet that every school has in their shelf. And the school social workers can rely on that. There's also, you call it? A decree in it from North Rhine-Westphalia, from our state, that also has a written stately binding frame for them. And there is issues on child protection. There's ways of how to, what to do when a child protection issue has come up in a school. It's also in this framework and the network, and it's like a big binder with lots of information on school social work. But it was a hard road to get there. And then we said, on top of this, the schools have to also implement an individual concept, which is special to their school.
Thank you. That just, it's so interesting to hear the process and that defining what is this school social work role, how does that sit within that educational context, and how do we bring it back to what social work delivers in practice?
Yeah, we can talk about this in detail as well on another time, if you like.
Yes.
And,
yes.
I can exactly tell you the people who were involved. And the University of Dortmund was, like, what you call it, leading this process or moderating this process.
Great.
A colleague and I, yes.
Another webinar, Nicole.
Yeah, why not?
Thank you.
I'm getting confident now. I've nearly forgotten that this is being recorded. Yes, and what's the first city to have a coordination office for school social work? And they are located on the school board in Dortmund. So what does this coordination office do? They coordinate and supervise all school social workers in Dortmund. So all the 190 people, they can contact this coordination office, and they are being looked after by them. They offer school-specific supervision circles being held monthly. School-specific means the school social workers in primary school, they have other issues than the ones in the gymnasium or in the Gesamtschule. So this is why they build these circles, and they can get their special supervision with their issues. And they do collegial case consultations. They implement networking strategies, offer further education conferences and forums. They are responsible for evaluation and quality control, and they allocate budgets and equipment. And they participate in the award for school social work at the university. This is the leader of the coordination office, and we have invented this first award of school social work at the university. So as I said in the other context, in the Bachelor of Social Work in Germany or in Dortmund, you can get a certificate and specialize in school social work. How do we do that? This is one, and now I come to the milestones that I was talking about in 2009, just 2 years after I've come back from Australia and got my head around this school social work on these interesting topics, and done a little bit of research in that area. We set up this School Social Work Award in the Bachelor of Social Work. And that means that our students, or the students who realize in a very early age, like in their first or second semester, they say, okay, school is a place I'm interested in. I think I would like to work in schools. Then they can do this award or certificate. They have to do empirical studies on education and inequalities unit. They have to do a course on counseling. Of course, they have to learn about school social work, child protection, and they do their 100-day placement with a school social worker mentor in schools. And these are the ones who are similar to your Swiss students, I would imagine. And they then have to write their final thesis on school social work as well. Also, we have some workshops with teacher students and external workshops that they need to go to, and then they get their award. And of course, this in Dortmund, the person who coordinates the school social worker, she always asks me, okay, have you got someone who has finished? Because I know they have more of an idea of school social working than the other students who did the generalistic Bachelor of Social Work. But you can also specialize in theater pedagogy or one or two other things at our university as well. The next milestone then was in 2015 when we had the first Federal Congress of School Social Work in Germany, in Dortmund at our university, which was sponsored by the Union of Education and Science. And even for us who organized this, it was quite overwhelming because we had 700 practitioners, researchers, and key stakeholders. And one side effect was that the school social workers who were there, like there were about 500 or so, said they have never been so well looked after before. You know that you have many teacher conferences and symposiums and stuff, but for school social work or social work in Germany, we don't have so many big events. And this one was one of the main tasks or aims that we had was we wanted to look after these people for 2 days and give them a really, really good program to enjoy and to participate. And what came out of it was that there was a foundation of a nationwide network for school social work. So because there were so many from all over Germany, they met in a certain panel or workshop, and they said, okay, we should meet again and set up a nationwide network. We want to be stronger, our voice needs to be louder, we want to have better working conditions, earn more money and so on, related to our qualifications. So this is what came out of this really exciting. And also the Dortmund, so-called Dortmund Declaration was written there in these 2 days. And I think, look at the time, I'm not going to read through this declaration, but you will get this PowerPoint anyway. And this is what they, fought for and what they wanted. And the declaration was sent to all the ministries of education in Germany and in the 16 federal states. It was in the news, and it was a big thing. And one of the main, or one of their bullet points was, that school social work needs to be included within the youth welfare law and the school laws in the states to become a regular offer at all schools in Germany. And from 2015 to, what have we got now? 2021, it took 6 years. It was finally now mentioned 2 years ago. It is now in the German federal law, and this is why we don't have this problem with the wording so much anymore, because we can call it school social work now, and it is mentioned there, and it still says, okay, the different states are responsible for the individual setting of the school social work, but it is after 50 years of fighting, it is now in the law, and we can call ourselves school social workers. Schulsozialarbeit, this is what it's called. Paragraph 13a, and a little step maybe, but it was a long, hard, stony road. And then just after that, the North Rhine-Westphalian network of school social workers, they came up with German quality standards on school social work. They have now what we had in very small for Dortmund. We have this now for North Rhine-Westphalia and other states when they're interested. And it's a quality standards on school social work that have been developed by this network and university researchers together. And for the first time in the 50-year history now of school social work, there's a guideline on how successful and professional school social work can structurally look like. This is only in German so far, but I'm sure when there's content that is of interest for you, we could translate it and look at it in depth if you want to. Yeah, I was invited to talk about the challenges also. And if you've got, can you still listen? Is it still okay? Another 10 minutes?
Yes,
then I can.
We are always happy to listen to you.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, because the challenges, I always have fun with the challenges, because as everywhere, we have a very teacher and social worker shortage. We have the COVID impact yet to be assessed, and the refugee issue that we have in Germany, but it leaves already a lot. We know that there's already a lot of students that are left behind in their learning and social and emotional development. And the school social workers can see this in school and everyday life, and they need assistance. They need colleagues that help them. And still, educational success is strongly dependent on origin and background, as I said in the beginning. And what our big challenge is, and a big difference to social work, is that the teacher's perspective focuses very much on the outward behavior and not on inner human processes. I can see it here again. Australian schools seem to be very behavioristically orientated, like rewarding and sanctioning is like the basic, and this is something that is easy for teachers. I can understand from their perspective that if you have a classroom of 25, 30 kids, that this rewarding with stickers and little presents and stuff is an easy way to do to change behaviors. But this is not what social work looks like. Social work wants to, or looks at, social work wants to see, why does this person present this behavior? What is behind this behavior? And how can we deal with it maybe in a different way? So there are role diffusions. And I have lots of school social workers who try the same, who start rewarding kids and sanction kids. And children then don't, they can't distinguish between, oh, this is a social worker, this is a teacher, when they do the same, or when they use the same educational practices. So we are very unequal partners in very complex settings. That's a big challenge, but also a very interesting field to work in, I would say, and to change things. Here I am again. Oh, it is overburdened, and our educational system is overburdened and antiquated, with a lack of financial, timely, and personal resources, in which changes are difficult to notice. And in Germany, it takes ages till a school changes something. Like this discussion about 9 years or 8 years of school, secondary school, has gone on for years, and then they said, okay, now we do this. We do the 8 year like everyone else does, and after 4 years, after one round of doing this, they said, oh no, it's not. This is not working. It's mainly the teachers had to put too much input in less time. That was the main problem. Instead of saying, okay, maybe we reduce the input and we teach less, but more with more quality, quantitatively, but yeah, with more quality. No, it's 9 years again now. So we have got very old students who start at a very old age. When I finished my studies, and I did not a very complex way or so, I was 38 when I had my first job as a professor with a full wage, 38 in Germany. Until that day, I was busy with qualifications. And this was early. I was one of the young professors, but I think for a person who wants to have children, family, whatever, live, buy a house, it wasn't possible when you get your first full wage with the age of 38. So yes, we're starting very late when we want to study. Behavioristic, I talked about that. A constrained context. Yes, this is one of the huge differences. You have to go to school in Germany and here in Australia as well. It is a constrained context. The child has not a choice. But social work, you can choose. It's a voluntary offer when it's offered in school, or this is how we practice it. When a teacher says, "Okay, you go to the school social worker and get some counseling," our good working school social workers would say, "No, I can't counsel this child when he or she hasn't decided to come and ask for this counseling." I have to say, no, the teacher is not the person who sends kids to me. They can talk to me and say, okay, I have an issue with this kid. I think there's someone with a problem. Can you approach them? Or, yeah, but if the kid says no, then this is the end of the story. And in this setting, often they often show a lack of knowledge and acceptance concerning the basic principles of social work, which are voluntary, holistic, low threshold, and potential orientated, and not deficit orientated. That's also sometimes very hard for a teacher student. They are trained to look at deficits. And of course, as you can imagine, you've only got 4 years' time in primary school to find out what the problem is with his kids learning. So they are trained to look at the deficits. He can't do his maths, he can't do his measures, he can't do this or that. What can we do about it? And social work looks at what can he do? What is he able to do? What is he capable of? What is there that he can or she can is good at, and this is a very different perspective. So this is one of my favorite citations from my dear colleagues Nicole Ermel and Stefanie Haupt. The constant balancing act between smooth adaptations to school settings, which is core for successful cooperation, and the clear demarcation of school expectations, for example, supply teaching or firefighter functions in crisis, in order to maintain a child and youth welfare specific identity, remains characteristic for school social work as a link between school and child and youth welfare services. So a constant balancing act between what the school needs and what social work can offer. And it looks like this. This is a squirrel. You don't have these in Australia, I have noticed. This is one animal that you don't have.
We'll pretend that there's a possum in between.
Yeah.
Or in Queensland, maybe a cane toad between the two.
Yeah, and the koala wouldn't be that far down, because this little squirrel is eating a nut or trying to open up a nut and holding on to this two trees, the school and the youth welfare. And this is for me a really nice picture to show this balancing act. The little nut is maybe the student, I don't know, and the squirrel is the school social worker. So yes. For learnings, I've only brought 3 or 4 quotes from colleagues that have worked in the field even longer than I have. I thought I was long in the field, but they are much longer. Florian Bayer and Uli Deinet. But I think they're so good that we need to. Florian Bayer-Carey is, by the way, the guy who did this clear box research, who said that he looked at counseling situations with pupils and school counselors or school social workers, and he said after he has looked through hundreds of hours of videos. And they interviewed the children afterwards and asked them simple questions like, so what of these strategies have helped you now to develop a better behavior and so on? They usually said, oh, strategies, I forgot about the strategy. What do you mean? He had nice cookies. He listened to me. She was so friendly. She was funny, whatever. But what do you mean by strategies? So the methods and the strategies, they fell behind in his research, which is really interesting on that matter. He says there's something else that you bring as a social worker, obviously, and that's what I try to teach my students as well, that they don't focus so much on the methodology, on the programs they want to use, but more on the listening skills and on the attitude. So school social work is not only in need of legitimizing on a political level, situations can also rise in everyday practice in which school social work has to justify its actions to teachers, school administrators, or parents. So it is therefore not surprising that many school social workers spend quite a lot of their working time on legitimizing their work to teachers and on other levels. So when they study with me, I try to teach them and say, okay, this work is not only got to do with the kids and the doing little projects and having fun. It is also talking to teachers in a field that is very rough, that has a different communication skills, and you have to legitimize your role, and you have to be sure of your role. You have to know how to explain it to others. And the school is no longer able to cope. I think that's the same here in Australia. You have a long tradition of counselors in schools as well, and psychologists and so on. The school is no longer able to cope with the complex demands of successful integration and the removal of barriers to learning. It is therefore dependent on the services of other systems, especially child and youth welfare. An offensive, emancipatory school social work therefore needs conciseness, independence, and professional power of interpretation in order not to be one-sidedly appropriated for narrowly defined school goals. This is also something that they encounter in everyday school life. And the last one, there's a certain danger of a counterproductive interaction in which the expansion of school social work leads to a social task being shifted onto it from the school, and the school not really opening up and moving towards change. Because of its success and recognition, school social work must not overestimate itself now and unintentionally generate counterproductive effects by becoming the social conscience of the school and everyone relying on it. This is also something, a danger or a challenge that we might encounter. So, yeah, the last one from the German Association of Social Work, and with the little chats that I had with Carrie already and the meetings, I think this is happening here as well. In order to counteract the shortage of skilled workers in a meaningful and sustainable way, it is necessary to provide the realistically calculated necessary resources, instead of simply filling vacant positions with non-specialist personnel, which will only accelerate a persistently tense situation. And from here, I could go back to the beginning of my presentation and start over again about the school system and how everything is, getting tense. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Everyone join me in a round of applause for Nicole. But I agree. I feel like the constant looped conversations around the intersection of school and wellbeing and social workers is an important conversation to have, but it's also important to make sure that we don't lose faith in what we're doing or lose the energy to do more, because it's such a big task. I think that for me, and happy to take questions from people in the audience as well, is that key focus of legitimising social work. And it will never cease to astound me that as a profession, we are still asked to legitimise and explain what it is that we do and what our value is, when there's inherent value and legitimacy in all of the other allied health professions, psychologists, nurses, counsellors even. Yet the concept of the generalist focused of social work means that our agency gets diluted, and what we do is hard to put a finger on. So it's almost like we do everything, therefore we don't really do anything. So I think that really stood out for me, the legitimizing idea, but also and we were talking about it before everyone joined today, that rescuer mentality. I can see so clearly in my kids' schools where social work could value add, but we don't want to swoop in and try and fix everything and say that the social worker is here to fix it, because that's too big a task too. It needs a systems approach. So they're the two things that jumped out for me. I'd really love to hear other people's thoughts too.